Thanks for joining us here on Construction Tech Talk, right here on Iron Pros. This is another of our We Talk to Smart People episodes, where we're joined by one of these industry insiders that I'd like to tap, Raffi Holzer. How's your day going, sir?
It's going well. Thank you for having me here.
Anytime. And I've been itching to have you on for a while. So you've been a venture-funded startup CEO in the construction technology space. You're doing other stuff now. We're going to learn all about it, so sit tight. So, Raffi, when I first met you, man, I was new in my job here at Iron Pros, and I just spent a lot of years in the bowels of a large technology organization. And it was so refreshing for one of the first folks for me to really, learn from and interact with in this technology space, these, young, capable, smart entrepreneurial guys. So what were you doing then? What are you doing now? What's going on with you?
Yeah, so thank you. I appreciate all those compliments.
Oh, just
What?
wait. I'm working on some better ones.
Okay. Well, that being said, what I was doing then, I was the CEO of a company called Avvir, where we ingested scans, laser scans, and photographs from construction sites, compared them to building information models to automatically track progress and quality on construction sites.
Yeah.
So I was doing that for a while and sold that company back in October. And now I'm helping other companies in the prop tech and construction tech spaces get off the ground, get to market, and also helping some larger companies, construction companies in particular in this space, evaluate technology and try and innovate.
Yeah, yeah. And this is a fascinating time in construction technology. We've got advancing cloud and mobile technology. We've got a greater ability to ingest data from edge devices that give us a lot of capabilities potentially when it comes to reality capture that can then, really close that gap between the suits in the back office and the plan and what's actually happening in the field. But when it comes to a lot of these more innovative companies, that innovation is being funded by venture capital. We see some of these companies then acquired by larger companies. But if you're that construction contractor executive, if you're that CFO, it's like, well, my team wants to adopt this technology from one of these venture funded startups. What I'm hoping you do is, from the outside looking in, not so much from the standpoint of the executive inside that tech company, but what kind of things should that executive be asking these vendors to figure out what their trajectory and what their future is like going to look like?
Yeah, I mean, before you even get there, frankly, as an executive at a construction company, I think the problem most of the executives face before they even get to the point where they're deciding whether to scale up with a particular solution is which of the hundreds of solutions they're bombarded with should they even try in the first place. And so creating a system initially just to evaluate which of the solutions out there you should trial and then how to trial them and ensure that you get to an answer on those trials rapidly, I think is really the first step in that process. And it's a thing that I'm helping those companies evaluate today, creating those processes for trial and innovation and bringing innovative solutions into their companies. But you raise a good point, which is a lot of larger companies are hesitant to work with or certainly scale up with startups when you don't know how long or if they're going to be around, right? They're relying on venture funding. They may not be profitable yet. Can they scale up with your organization? And will they be around for the long term? You have a couple of options as an executive in the construction industry, or really any large company that's looking to work with a startup. And frankly, first of all, I encourage large companies to do it, despite the risks inherent in working with small startup companies. I think the payoffs are there. It's where a lot of the lifeblood of innovation for larger companies is going to come from. But there are a few things that you can do when you're evaluating these companies. I mean, the first thing you can do is Google that company and put Crunchbase next to it. Basically, look how much money they've raised and how long ago. Just from those two data points, you can get a sense of, how much longer do I think they're going to be around? Are they on a good trajectory? The second thing you're probably going to want to do is how much they've raised relative to their competitors. That honestly is going to be your best signal of, is this company going to be around for the long term? Because if you believe that that sector, right, that overall value proposition this company is delivering is important, who's raised the most is a really good determinant of who's got staying power.
Yeah, yeah, and as I look at these types of things, I look at it from a couple of different angles. One is like, yeah, how much have they raised? Because that will give them a certain amount of cushion. Some companies may burn through that more or less productively than
Yeah.
others. It's really easy from what I've seen to burn through a lot of venture capital without really growing that market footprint, without really advancing the product substantially in terms of like new features or functionality. But I also think of the standpoint of you don't get involved in a venture capital company, in a venture funding organization. You're not a venture capitalist if you're stupid about this stuff. And, we can look at folks like this more as influencers or as like that canary in the coal mine, where it's, hey, there's probably something here. These guys are pretty smart. I'm going to look into that.
Yeah. There's also, I mentioned you can look at the market leaders who's raised the most and have the most staying power in your industry, but I don't want to give that as blanket advice for how to proceed with working with startups, because it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And unfortunately, it's not always the best products that win the fundraising game. And so I'm not generally encouraging large companies to buy into that philosophy and make sure that whoever raises the most will win the game. There's actually a lot of leverage you have as a large company to help your favorite product win that game, so to speak, right? So if you've looked at a handful of companies in a particular space and you like one, right? You've trialed several and you've done a diligent trial process. You've settled on one that you like. It may not be the best funded, but you think it is the best product. There's another self-fulfilling prophecy mechanism that large contractors can take advantage of and often don't as well as they could, which is if you can scale that company across, where you can scale that product across your company and across your company's projects, you're going to help that company stick around for a much longer time, right? They will likely be able to raise their next round of funding just off of the expansion they had with you, especially if they're early on. And what I find often happens is large companies will stay in trial mode longer than makes sense, right? So they'll try it, they'll settle on it, and then they'll still roll out that new product in dribs and drabs. That company probably worked really hard to win your business. And if you want them to stay around, give them as much of your business as they can handle. That is going to have a market effect on their staying power.
Yeah, to in some situations too, I've actually seen contractors making the investments in that product and really becoming a VC firm themselves, and they might be some of the very largest contractors we can think of course.
Yeah, and look, those, in my experience, those corporate VCs are not making huge investments. What it does buy you is, you can get a peek into the books perhaps and make sure that that company you've invested in actually has staying power. You can give a certain amount of advice on, hey, maybe your burn is too high, and express your interests in a way that you can't as purely a customer. But I think also what I've seen too often is companies, large companies, their corporate VC arms will make an investment into a startup, but still not roll out that startup's product across their entire company, right? The VC investment should be an expression of your faith and confidence, should be the highest expression of your faith and confidence in that startup you're making the investment into. And if you have that confidence in the product, you should find a way to roll it out to the rest of your company, ensure you're utilizing it across your company as quickly as possible.
Yeah. Now, as we're doing due diligence on these companies here with Iron Pros, we try to probe around a little bit to find out, well, if you were to discount everything you're doing with research and development right now, it goes into the product. How close are you to being profitable? Generally, companies don't like to answer those questions.
Correct.
Sometimes they do. Um, once you're at that point of doing like due diligence in earnest, how likely is it that some of these VC funded technology companies will kind of open the kimono a little bit and give you more visibility in terms of their financials?
You will get access to those financials if you are an investor. You will not get access to those financials as a customer. And frankly, it would be poor practice for any business to open up their financials for the most part to a potential customer. There's certain exceptions to that rule, but for the most part, it makes sense for you to, as a CEO of a startup, to kind of keep that behind closed doors. Um, and frankly, I would encourage, if GCs out there really want to get a peek behind closed doors, get aligned with the startups you feel invested in already and actually make an investment. That's how you get access to the books. But again, and I'll harp on this point, that needs to be followed up by an expansive and intentional rollout of that product, because that's really how corporate VCs can be most impactful, right? You create the success of the company you've invested in by being one of their biggest and fastest customers.
Yeah, one other area that I tend to try to probe around is like, well, nobody has a job until somebody sells something. And taking a look at the sophistication and size of the sales organization. Do they have their act together from a marketing standpoint? Have they aligned themselves with external parties who can feed projects their way? If they have partners, what percentage of deals with net new customers involve an external partner? All those are things that, frankly, I delve into. Do you think that makes any sense, or am I, yeah, kind of barking up the wrong tree?
No, I mean, I think that does make sense as, from the perspective of a venture investor. It's you honestly, this is why corporate VCs should make so much sense in a way if they can, leverage themselves correctly. Because you probably have been a customer first as a corporate VC. And so you should have a sense of how well this company sells, how their sales and marketing and growth organizations work. So by the time you're choosing to make an investment and hopefully do an extensive rollout, you've got a sense of that from firsthand knowledge.
Yeah, I tend to look at it also from the standpoint of the buyer because if I'm betting on the fact that this company is going to be around for a while, it's like, well, they've raised a lot of money. Are they helping themselves at all? How much of that is going into product, but also how much of that is going into finding new friends and commercialization. And, I've seen a few companies that seem to have done better. And I look back to the initial briefings we had, it's like, yeah, well, they aligned themselves early on with CPA firms that started to, steer business in for them, or maybe they extend another solution and they go to market aggressively with them. Anything like that, I look at as, being a check in the good box
Yeah.
for a company like that. Are there other things that you think that construction technology buyer can do to figure out, well, how stable, how well run is this organization? Are they likely to be using this venture capital money that they're sitting on in a way that's really going to help them bust out of the pack?
So you can talk to some of their VC investors, right, and due diligence in that way, and talk to some of their board members and get a sense for how that company is operating. Again, you can become an investor and look at the books for yourself. One other thing I recommend, though, on a different track, and again, this is about just kind of activating that self-fulfilling prophecy and guaranteeing the success of the company you feel invested in as a product or actually financially invested in, is you can act as part of a consortium, right? So if you as a single GC decide to roll out a particular product, that'll move the needle for that company when it goes out to raise its next round by a certain amount. But if you're acting as part of a consortium of GCs that together, let's say it's 5 GCs together, are evaluating products in unison, and all 5 of you decide we're going to roll this product out to as many of our projects as possible over the course of the next year, that is going to have a dramatically greater effect on that company's ability to raise its next round, on its ability to get to profitability, and its ability to stick around for the long term. And I've seen a handful of GCs start to act in coordination with one another when it comes to evaluating technology. I haven't seen them start doing it when it comes to purchasing. And I think there's hesitation there because they see one another as competitors and they see their own selections of technology as some differentiating competitive factor for them. But I think when it comes to working with startups, acting in concert with your competitors, quote unquote, actually makes a ton of sense. You're going to help advance the industry by acting in unison. And you'll compete on other factors.
Yeah, yeah, and certainly, that might be a better tactic in some product categories than others. I think
Sure.
that a lot of people get really, protective about their methodology when it comes to things like estimating. And
Yes.
everybody thinks they're the master of the universe, but yeah, there are certain principles you still pretty much need to follow. But then also you have, the ability to, look at software that is shared as part of an extended project team. So things that wind up pinging transactional processes back and forth between an owner, a general, a subcontractor. Chances are you want to do that as part of a group.
Yeah. Yeah. Frankly, things that improve operating efficiency are things you want to share because the more they become standardized across the construction industry, the more benefit, frankly, they're going to have for you. It's one of those a rising tide lifts all boats situations where I think, you know, contractors are going to win against one another is how they position themselves to their customers, right? We specialize in building this particular sort of construction. We have expertise in high rise or in horizontal. When it comes to technology that's just enabling you to do your job more efficiently, doing that as a group is going to work.
Yeah, yeah. So before I let you go back to doing some real work here, let me kind of fire one more big, wide open question at you. And my goal here is to give contractors a healthy dose of FOMO, fear of missing out. If you're not getting involved with evaluating and rolling out these venture funded construction technology software products, what are you missing out on?
You're missing out on what's next, right? The construction industry is notoriously a slow industry to move, but innovation is happening in this space, and some of it is incredibly exciting. If you are not actively getting involved, whether it's in working with these startups or investing in them, the investing piece is not required, but certainly working with them, evaluating them, and seeing how they can potentially impact your business. If you're ignoring that component, you're going to be left behind.
Yeah, yeah, and nobody wants that. And that's why we spend time with folks like Raffi and why we delve as deeply as we do into all the different aspects of construction technology here on Iron Pros. So if you realize more and more that this stuff's going to be essential to your company's survival and growth, keep on coming back here. And we'll have Raffi back soon.
Thanks so much.